This week's Nifty Gifties on F5 Live is proudly powered by the Microsoft Store. Whether you're looking for a new laptop, a tablet, an Xbox, games, or a whole lot more, you can get them at the Microsoft Store. And remember that current students, faculty, parents, and active military can save up to 10% off almost anything. And to browse the products and learn more about the discounts, you can go to f5live.tv/Microsoft. If you live in a rural area, you know how difficult it can be to get all sorts of services. Basically anything that involves electronic infrastructure, whether it be a solid wired internet connection or cable or even cellular service. It can be a real pain. Over the last couple of years, we've seen some new innovations come into the space. You know, there's been satellite internet for a while. Companies like HughesNet, that I think used to be part of DirecTV and then wasn't and then might be again. I don't know. They were offering, they might still offer satellite-based internet, although for a long time the upload was still dial-up based and the download was satellite-based because it wasn't a two-way communication. Luckily, over the last couple of years, that technology has gotten better. We know Elon Musk has Starlink, which is actually a surprisingly solid connection. Todd Cochran from Geek News Central has a Starlink connection that he cannot believe how well it works. And he's out in a rural area where he could not get a solid wired connection. And so let's move forward to the near future. And we're going to actually see Starlink be used to produce a cellular signal as well. It's not going to be a world-class signal, but it is going to be a cellular signal that will be able to be used in areas where it's impossible to build a tower because of, regulations or licensing or the people who own the land don't want to have a tower there. There's all kinds of reasons why it's impossible. It's also sometimes impractical, to put up a multi-million-dollar cell tower for 6 people because there's no way that ever gets paid off. So there's lots of problems in rural areas and places with smaller populations. And so T-Mobile and Starlink are teaming up. The second-generation Starlink satellites are going to have the ability to be used essentially as cell towers. Now, data speeds aren't going to be great, and Elon Musk kind of joked that if there aren't many people in the area, you might get video. But the point is that you'll have cellular. You'll be able to make calls, send texts, normal cell phone things, without the huge expense of putting up towers, because Starlink's already putting satellites in orbit for their own purposes. And so multi-purposing them, doing a little bit of licensing deal with T-Mobile totally makes sense. It's what happened with Dish Network and Sirius before the Sirius XM merger. Sirius was actually licensing time on Dish Network satellites to make the process of getting satellite radio easier and not having to put as many satellites up. Exact same thing here. I think this is a really smart move on both Starlink and T-Mo's.
Sure, why not? T-Mobile has been really good about doing things to try and sort of provide extra value to customers, whether it's giving them some level of free included international service when they're traveling. Not the fastest, but
T-Mobile Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Right?
I never found anything I like. I'm a T-Mobile member. I've never found anything I liked on T-Mobile Tuesday, but
20 cents per gallon back on Shell gas.
Oh, okay. I don't really buy the gas in my family, so I wouldn't have noticed that one. But know if we even have Shell around here, but yeah. So I mean, anyway, sure, this is a good move by them. People want to have their um, at least have some degree of perception where they're going.
Sure.
I have to say that while I really like my T-Mobile service, it's not equally good everywhere I go, even in my
Sure.
local area. It's not
Sure.
great in my house, although it doesn't matter because I have Wi-Fi. Uh, as long as my home internet is working, and
I've got
it's
a
not,
I've got
you
a
know,
repeater
yeah,
on this building
uh,
just in
and
case.
I mean, that's not. I mean, my biggest concern is when I'm out and about. It seems to be pretty decent, but I don't get anywhere near 5G speeds on my 5G phone. Um, I actually get better speeds when I turn it to LTE only.
Mm,
Uh, so, now it could be that because my phone doesn't support the M-Wave band, so maybe that's maybe that's the big issue.
could be.
But
Yeah, because
anyway,
5G standard speeds aren't that much different than LTE, uh, the final generation of LTE.
yeah, I mean, so today I took a trip to New Jersey, and as we were driving down the highway, there was actually a T-Mobile ad, and it said, it's very coincidental, 5G from here to Philadelphia, like which if you travel, I think the road we were on was like I-95 or something. We travel down it like from where we were in northern Jersey, you keep going and you end up in Philadelphia. So the sign was like from here to,
Right.
although that's like 2 or 3 hours drive. Uh, so I thought, okay, normally I have my phone at LTE only because it actually, if I have it on 5G anywhere near my house, it's terrible. It's like operating on 3G. So, which is weird because your phone should be smart, and you would
Right.
think and say, oh, 4G is better here, so I'm just going to stick with LTE. But it doesn't, unless there's no 5G at all. If there's any
Right.
5G, it will try to grab the bad 5G. So I do this, and my wife does it on her completely different phone. We set the phones to just do 4G, but I wanted to try this, so I set it to 5G, and I did a speed test, and I got like 40 down, 20 up, which is decent. It's pretty decent, but it's not 5G. I mean,
Right.
isn't that I've gotten faster on 4G on LTE. Now, in the same area where I switched it to LTE, it was like 16 and 16. So the 5G actually was better where I was testing
Okay.
by a little bit. But, you know, I was in the impression that, I've never gotten a 5G speed that was like, these you know, hundreds of megabytes per
Sure.
second that you're hundreds of megabit per second that you're supposed to get, right? I've never gotten speeds that were better than a good 4G connection.
Yeah.
So,
And
uh,
I experienced that too. It So inside the studio, I only get 5G, right? And then as soon as I step out of the studio into mission control, it goes to 5G UC. Like it's the threshold for the studio right there. When I when I step past it, I go to 5G UC. So sitting here right now, I just got 18.8 down. But
right.
if I cross that door, I'll get 160 down.
Oh, well. Now,
Unfortunately, the repeater that's in here is not 5G. So it was a review product from a while back. So it's actually a 4G uh, repeater. So I get a significantly stronger 4G if 5G isn't great. But yeah, it's wild the difference between standard 5G and 5G UC, which is what T-Mobile calls millimeter band. So as soon as I step into mission control, boom, I'm gonna go up by 8x.
wow. Well, this phone I have doesn't even support that because it's a Pixel 4a 5G, which doesn't have that band.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the next phone that I get. Maybe we'll have that, and then we'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's good to know. Like, as I'm a T-Mobile customer, and it's good to know that if I was going somewhere that was a little bit off the grid, that there was a better chance I would get some kind of signal.
Yeah,
So
because when we did
so I like
our
that.
road trip, beginning of July, there were a lot of places I ended up where the phone would go 3G, and then dot 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 3G 4G 5G 4G 3G dot 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 dot. So I mean, we ended up in some places where we wouldn't have had service, and I think the audience knows that we had car trouble and the rental car died on us. That would have been horrible to have happened in one of those dead zones. Fortunately, we also had an AT&T phone with us, and between the two devices, we were never without service, which I thought was interesting. But they were on and off at different times, but we were never 100% without service. But we're the oddballs, right? Most people have one service across a group.
Yep.
So, and the good news here is I know everybody's hearing satellite and phones, and they're thinking Jurassic Park 3, and a phone that only calls on satellite. It's a very different thing. Not the case. This is going to work on the quote is most, if not all, of the active T-Mobile phones. Now, if it's one of the older phones that's been around for a while, it may or may not. But this is supposed to support basically anything that's out there right now. So you won't have to have anything special. You won't have to say, well, I might end up in one of these places. I need to get this model, like we were just talking about with 5G and 5G UC, right? There's none of that. The standard devices that are on the market should all work with this new feature, which I think technologically is fascinating. I can't wait to hear more about how that works. But I also look forward to seeing it in action. I suspect that one of us will figure out how to do some tests on it.
Yeah, I mean,
I
mean,
live.
we don't do a lot of. So to be fair, we don't do phone coverage at all at Tom's Hardware. We used to before my time, and then it was decided in the company that that would be Tom's guide to do. And now phones are not a kind of enthusiast topic that we cover.
Right.
But interestingly, since
one of
you
the
brought
sisters
it up,
should,
we
at the very
yes,
least.
although I'm sure they will, but maybe, hopefully. But anyway, but interestingly, we had an interesting. One of our editors, Brandon Hill, had a very interesting experience with T-Mobile's home internet service, and home internet, like, I think this is what everybody would like, right? Like, you would like 5G to be able to replace your home internet provider. You would like it to be able to replace FiOS or Spectrum or Cox or Comcast or one of those.
Because that gives us one more alternative, right? Because you and I talk all the time about the internet monopoly for so many people. This bypasses that and gives another alternative. And with competition comes fixes.
Yes, right. So that's, for one, it brings more competition. For another, the installation cost is like nil, right? No one has to come to your house to install it.
Drill holes.
So drill holes, install it, whatever. It seems like a great idea. However, there's probably a reason why no one has rolled such a thing out until recently. So T-Mobile is the first and only, I believe, unless you do know of another, company to offer 5G home internet.
Only one I know of. There was Clearwire in the 4G WiMAX era, but nothing.
Right, I remember that, and we actually did test it, and it was not. That was not, I was like getting you 3 megabit per second, which, at the time I guess wasn't so terrible, but that's terrible for home internet.
Yeah.
Uh, so, uh, so Brandon, who lives in Brandon lives in I think he lives in Brandon, who lives in South Carolina, was
Okay.
like, "Hey, I can get this in my area. I'm going to get it," and he got it. And um, for 2 weeks that he had it, it was fantastic. He was getting 500 megabit down and
Ooh.
like 70 up,
Wow.
which is which for $50 a month. Uh, you know, the he used something like 750 gigabytes of data at that time because this is his home internet and there's no cap. So he was using a
Oh,
ton of data uh, because his family was using it for streaming
sure.
on a bunch of different TVs. And so he wrote an article for us saying, "This is fantastic. I'm so happy with it." And people read it. They were excited, even though it's not normally subject to cover. He was doing it. It's a tech topic. We're like, hey, let's write about it.
Sure.
2 weeks
And
after he
and
got it.
in fairness, doing something this niche in this market is pretty enthusiast.
Yes. I mean, look, we're cool with stuff like this. I mean, I always tell our writers, like, if it happens to you, then it could be a really good story.
Sure, sure.
So, like the story that you and I were talking about last week about wiping your computer, like that happened to me. I have a
Mm-hmm.
computer I needed to wipe. So anyway, the so after 2 weeks, we said, hey, why don't you do a follow up story and like talk about how it's been for 2 weeks and like actually do something even more intense, like try streaming on like 3 or 4 TVs in 4K at the same exact time and report if that's okay. So, like a couple hours into him working on the story, we get a message from him. My whole internet went out and I can't get it back. Uh, he he tried calling T-Mobile and they had him do all the standard stuff that they have you. Did you turn it off and on again? Did you
Sure.
power cycle it? Whatever. Did you try taking the SIM card out and putting it back in? All that stuff. And then after they had him on for a long time, they said, "Oh, since we can't find another solution, we're telling you there's a tower being upgraded in your area. Try again. Try again in a couple of days." And
In a couple of
he was
days.
annoyed because, right, he's like, this is my home internet. Like, I can't, just go without. So he canceled the service and he went back to Spectrum, which is what he had before. Uh, Now that would have been the end of the story, I guess, except that he started looking around the internet and it seems that there were a ton of complaints from people about the same thing happening to them, and they were never able to get back on the service again and had to cancel. Like a lot
Wow.
of people saying, like, I've signed up for the service. It was great for a few weeks or a month, and then it disconnected, and they sent me new hardware, and it didn't
Oh.
work. They like, I think they had sent Brandon new hardware too at one. It's not a hardware problem. We don't know exactly what it is, but we have one of the readers have. There are some towers that it does have something to do with the tower in that there are some types of towers that will not accept a connection from the home internet box. Even so,
Sure.
he like a friend of his who has T-Mobile for phones, which he does not, came over and their phone worked fine. So
Right.
like T-Mobile service is working fine in his house, but home internet won't. Apparently, it may hit, like, if it hits a certain type of tower, it won't be given a connection or whatever. And
Oh.
that's different from your phone, which can kind of jump around to different towers. So anyway,
Because
we
it has to be a
have,
UC tower.
I guess. So anyway, the the long story short of it is he couldn't get the service back. Um, and T-Mobile didn't really have an answer when we contacted them. They're like, "Oh well, why don't you call our support again and we'll help you?" Like, um, but We have a story coming out perhaps tomorrow. We'll see. Perhaps later in the week, where we've interviewed someone who is a former T-Mobile customer service employee who recently left and has some inside information about what is actually going on there.
Wow.
And it doesn't. Um, so we
I can't
also
wait for
heard
this.
from a we also heard from I won't spoil what the
No.
former person said right now, but uh, I will spoil that we also talked to a bunch of readers, and some of whom had I mean, there were actually a couple of people who actually had to continue to work for them, so good for
Sure.
them. But uh, there a whole bunch who had like voluntarily just mailed in and after reading the last article about this and said like this is terrible, mine doesn't work. And the best story was from someone who got the service, was getting terrible connectivity all along. They never had the 500 down that
Okay.
Brandon had. And um, and when they finally, after many support calls, T-Mobile said to them, "Sorry, your area doesn't have good enough service for this," and so they canceled his service. So they sold it to him when they never should have.
Wow.
In other words, so
Wow.
um, so unfortunately, it seems like this service has some issues.
Yeah, sounds like it. I know that I've got an alert for my address, and now I'm even more interested because I want to
I
try
mean,
it. Right? I
I
want
mean,
to try
I
it at
I
the very
I
least
I
to be
hope
able to play in this
try it.
game.
Try try it and see what happens. I mean, you might luck out. It seems to me like maybe if there's not a lot of people taking up the whatever the good tower is near you, and then your connection, I guess, stays and it's good. I mean, I also don't know. I mean,
Oh,
this
because the
is
more
we.
people, the
It,
smaller the cell gets. And if you're on a ring,
yeah,
you might fall out of that cell when more things are connected. Fascinating.
yeah, that might have happened to him. I also wonder if the fact that he used so much data might have gotten him kicked off the tower or something. But
Maybe.
that's just pure speculation on my
Yeah.
part,
Yeah.
because there's not supposed to be a data cap. And let's be clear, like that, you and I have talked about data
Fascinating.
caps before.
Yeah.
He's not going around running a peer-to-peer server over here,
Sure.
you know, serving video files to people. Like he's just using it like the rest of us would use it, in that
Mm-hmm.
he's cut the cord and he's got a family, and so there's multiple people using multiple devices at the
Sure.
same time streaming things.
Sure.
That's that's reality for a lot of people today. So
Yeah.
using a few hundred gigabytes of data in a couple of weeks is not crazy at all for a normal person.
No. What did we last time we did a story about average home internet usage, the average monthly usage for a household had gone up to 1.3 terabytes a month or something like that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Was that what it was? Something
So
like
in
that.
effect,
So I
oh,
mean,
okay, I didn't remember
he
that.
was just slightly ahead of at 750 for 2 weeks. Ever so slightly ahead of the average U.S.
Yeah,
household.
I'm not sure if that's a precise. I'm not sure if that's a
But
precise number when
but
you
yeah,
know.
but I mean, if we're
Yeah.
talking 750, that's only slightly ahead of the average
Yes,
consumer household.
and
And power, remember, they had to bump the baseline for what a power user was considered up to like 2.3 or something because of the shift of the average. So yeah,
really, yeah,
he was well below power user at theoretically 1.5 ish over
right,
a 2 week
yeah.
time period. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Weird.
fair enough. So, so anyway, I mean, I would be really curious. I'd be really curious what happens. One more thought I'll give you on that is that my coworker Matt, who lives around here, Brandon lives in South Carolina, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
but Matt lives in New Jersey. He got a notice that he could get it in his apartment, and he was eager to try it for the same reason. Like, I want to see what happens.
Yeah.
And he went to sign up. As soon as he signed up, he got an email saying, "Sorry that we don't actually have it in your area, even though you signed up." So, um,
Oh.
so in other words, let me know if you do it. If you actually get a shipping notice that something that they're
Yeah.
shipping you the whatever you call the modem.
Yeah. For sure.
Device, because
now more than ever I want to do this. Not necessarily because I want the service, but I've wanted to test it, right? I thought that was a fascinating thing. I've wanted to test it. I tested out Clearwire long ago. I had one of those ugly black boxes for a little while. So yeah, I'd love to be able to test this and be able to compare it to what that was a decade plus ago. Just to see what wireless home internet looks like. So I'm on a list. I want as soon as it's available, I will give it a shot. But you said that'll be this week, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day.
yes, we're just getting some more detail from a couple sources, and then our follow up. So we'll see.
Look forward to that. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of F5 Live Refreshing Technology. If you did, please subscribe to the channel down below, and of course hit the notification bell because we know that subscriptions don't mean much on YouTube anymore. If you've got topics that you'd like us to talk about in the future, please comment them down below. And if you'd like to not follow us on YouTube, there's lots of ways that you can follow along with our content by going to plughitslive.com/subscribe. There you'll see all of our shows and all of the ways that you can watch, listen, and follow along.